Let me start with something simple, yet uncomfortable. A question almost no one likes to face when the day is full. The phone vibrates, the mind races, and the world demands quick answers. If everything passes, why does it still hurt so much? It's not a pretty question. It's not comfortable, but it's honest. And perhaps that's exactly why it silences the world for a few seconds when it's finally truly heard. Because on some level, you've felt it before. That strange feeling of living, but at the same time just going through the days, waiting for something to end. The tiredness, the pain, the difficult phase, the anxiety, the lack of meaning. As if life were always on hold. Perhaps you've never put this into words, but have you noticed how everything seems temporary? People come and go. Intense emotions arise and then dissolve. Moments that seemed definitive disappear without warning. Yet, even knowing that everything is fleeting, the attachment remains. The mind insists on holding on. And that's where the silent conflict is born. Because one part of you understands that nothing lasts, but another part acts as if everything needs to last. It is in this internal, almost invisible space that suffering settles in, not as an explicit drama, but as a constant, psychological, practical, daily noise. Buddhism has observed this for millennia, not as a distant theory, but as direct experience. There is a simple, almost minimalist term that carries enormous weight: anicca, impermanence. Everything changes, everything passes, nothing remains as the mind would like it to. And yet, human beings continue trying to build emotional security in things that, by nature, are not stable. Relationships, identity, plans, expectations. The aesthetics of modern life are full of promises of control, but reality remains fluid, unstable, unpredictable. And perhaps that is precisely what is most frightening. Notice how the fear of impermanence doesn't appear as explicit panic. It disguises itself as haste, as a need to fill time, as anxiety for answers, as difficulty in remaining silent. Being still is frightening because, when the noise diminishes, the question returns. If everything passes, what remains? If nothing is fixed, where does the heart rest? The practical mind wants quick solutions. The psychological mind wants security. But life, at its core, continues to be movement. A continuous flow that doesn't ask permission to change. Perhaps that's why so many people feel tired without knowing exactly why. It's not just physical tiredness. It's the wear and tear of fighting against what is inevitable, of trying to make permanent what is transient. Buddhism doesn't see this as a moral failing, but as the natural ignorance of the mind, a mind that seeks solidity in a fluid world. And the more it tries to control, the more it suffers. The more it resists change, the more pain it feels when something slips away. This isn't a distant, overly philosophical story. It's the silent story that happens inside you every day, in the small details, in the automatic reactions, in the thoughts that arise uninvited. And here's the point that almost no one mentions right at the beginning. Suffering doesn't just come from the fact that everything passes. It arises from how you relate to it, from the way the mind interprets impermanence, from the internal resistance that transforms something natural into something threatening. There's a profound difference between knowing that everything passes and consciously accepting it, between understanding it intellectually and feeling it in your body, in your breath, in the rhythm of life. And it's precisely in this space, between knowing and living, that something begins to reveal itself, slowly, almost silently, as if life itself were waiting for you to stop running so it can continue the story. Before we move on, I want to invite you to do something simple, yet meaningful, not as an automatic gesture, but as a small, conscious commitment to yourself. If at any point in this reflection something has resonated within you, even if you can't yet explain what it is, that's already a sign. A sign that change doesn't begin outside. It begins in how you observe your own life, and every real change needs to be declared, even if only in silence, or in a single word. Therefore, I invite you to write something simple but honest in the comments. It could be, "I choose to change." It could be, "I am waking up." It could simply be, "Presence." It's not for me, it's for you. When you write, the mind stops merely consuming. and begins to participate, and that changes everything. The unconscious registers, attention shifts, the process begins. If this video resonates with you, liking it isn't just about supporting the channel, it's about signaling to yourself that this kind of reflection matters, that you want more content that speaks calmly, deeply, and consciously, and not just in a rush and with noise. And if you haven't subscribed yet, think of it as a practical choice, creating a recurring space in your life for this kind of pause, this kind of more lucid and philosophical look at the human experience. We will move forward. We will delve deeper. We will touch on the point that truly transforms the relationship with time, with pain, and with the meaning of life. But before that, notice where you are now, what this question has already begun to stir within you. Because the next part makes no sense without this inner disposition to look more honestly at what passes, and at what, silently, insists on remaining. Do you realize how skillful the human mind is at transforming something fleeting into foundation? We look at what shines for a few moments and silently decide, this is where meaning resides. And then begins the mistake that seems so normal that almost no one questions it. You seek meaning in status, as if a title could protect you from emptiness. You seek meaning in relationships, as if someone's presence could guarantee permanence. You seek meaning in control, as if planning every detail could prevent life from changing. And you seek meaning in an imagined future, as if tomorrow were a solid place where you will finally be able to rest. But there's a psychological and practical detail that changes everything. The problem isn't desiring good things. The problem is using things that disappear as if they were anchors. And when you transform what is flow into a prison, what Buddhism calls dukkha is born. That deep discomfort, that underlying anxiety, that feeling that even when things go right, something is still missing. You achieve something, and for a moment you feel relief. But soon another goal appears, another fear, another demand. You receive attention, and for a moment you feel warmth. But soon insecurity arises. What if I lose? You organize yourself, control, predict, adjust, and for a moment you feel secure, until life shows you that it doesn't follow your script. And then comes the uncomfortable, yet liberating truth. Suffering doesn't come from loss. It comes from attachment. Loss only reveals what was already hidden, the idea that you needed to hold on to feel whole. It's like trying to hold onto a river with your hands. You enter the water and, in an impulse, try to keep the current exactly as it is. And the more you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. And the more it slips, the more your mind goes into emergency mode. Not because you are weak, but because the brain has been trained to believe that emotional security comes from external stability. But life isn't an object. Life is movement. It's a breath that goes in and out. And notice how minimalist, almost aesthetic in its simplicity, this is. You don't need to make the exhalation happen. When you try to control the air too much, you lose the rhythm. When you trust the process, the body finds its way. And the mind learns little by little that not everything needs to become a battle. Imagine a leaf falling. It doesn't fall hastily, nor with guilt. It doesn't explain itself. It simply fulfills the nature of the cycle. But we humans do differently. When something falls, we transform it into a narrative of identity. If it's over, I'm worthless. If it changed, I failed. If it didn't stay, it wasn't real. And that's where attachment becomes pain. When you mix impermanence with personal meaning, as if change were a judgment on you. Buddhism is almost surgical on this point. It doesn't say don't love, it doesn't say don't build, it doesn't say don't want. It says consciously see what anicca, impermanent, is and stop demanding that it be eternal to give you peace. Because that's exactly what the mind does without realizing it. It demands eternity from things that were born to change. It demands certainty from people who are also trying to understand themselves. It demands control over a world that is, by definition, unstable. And this demand is what creates tension. You stay on alert. You live with the feeling that you need to guarantee something. Guarantee that the feeling doesn't end. Guarantee that the image doesn't crumble. Guarantee that the story doesn't change. And when you live like that, even the good moments become burdened, because joy is already accompanied by the fear of losing. Perhaps deep down, you've already noticed this in the small scenes of the day. That instant when you look at a message and your body reacts before your consciousness. That microsecond when someone's silence becomes a storm inside you. That habit of checking, confirming, comparing, predicting. It seems practical, it seems intelligent, it seems careful, but often it's just attachment disguised as organization. And the most curious thing is that the more you try to hold on, the more life seems to slip away. Not out of cruelty, but because everything that is alive moves. And it moves even more when it feels it's being squeezed. There's a conscious way to get through this without becoming cold. There is a philosophical, poetic, and profoundly human way to find meaning not in what remains, but in how you experience what passes. But before we get to that turning point, I want you to feel a question in your heart. What is the thing you are holding on to most tightly today? And calling that meaning. And if you want to make a real commitment to your change, write a short phrase in the comments, as if it were an intimate vow, I let go. Or if it makes more sense to you, I choose peace. Like and subscribe, because in the next part I'm going to show you how meaning appears when you stop begging for permanence and start practicing presence in the simplest and most transformative way possible. Perhaps now you're expecting me to give you a clear answer, a definitive statement, something that will finally organize everything within you. That's what the mind usually wants after facing discomfort. A quick conclusion, a solid meaning to cling to. But the Buddhist teaching that changes everything begins precisely by breaking that expectation. It doesn't offer a meaning to hold on to. It offers a way of being, and that completely changes the psychological, practical, and conscious game of life. The central point is simple, almost disconcerting in its simplicity. Meaning is not in what lasts. It never has been. It lies in how you live each instant while everything changes. The mind suffers because it believes that only something permanent can justify the effort of existing, but direct experience shows otherwise. Life doesn't need external meaning to be valid. It is already the experience happening, now, at this very moment, before any explanation. When Buddhism points this out, it's not being poetic by chance. It's being precise. Notice how your mind works. It lives in a state of projection. It's almost always a few steps ahead, trying to predict, adjust, secure. Even in calm moments, there's a subtle urgency. A what then? A when will this end? A when will I get there? But the present moment doesn't answer these questions. The present moment simply happens. And that's why it's so frightening. Because in it, there is no control, only presence. And presence demands courage. It demands being fully present in what is being experienced, without hiding in the past or becoming numb to the future. This is where mindfulness comes in, what Buddhism calls sati. Not as a productivity technique, not as a wellness fad, but as an existential stance. Mindfulness is about stopping living as if you're always late for your own life. It's about noticing your body breathing, your mind reacting, your emotions arising, without immediately transforming that into narrative, judgment, or identity. When you observe consciously, something silently changes. Suffering begins to lose its power because you are no longer fighting the experience. You are present in it. And perhaps this is the deepest and most difficult revelation to accept. Life doesn't need to make sense to be lived deeply. It needs to be felt. The problem is that we've been trained to interpret everything before living it, to classify, define, explain, fit things into place. And when something doesn't fit, the mind collapses. But the present moment doesn't ask for explanation. It asks for presence. When you stop chasing answers, something reveals itself behind the mental noise, not as a grand mystical truth, but as a simple relief, an inner rest that doesn't depend on anything external. Observe the moments when you are fully present, even if they are rare. Perhaps while walking without headphones, perhaps while observing the sky, perhaps while taking a deep breath after a hard day. In those moments, you are not searching for meaning. You are alive. And curiously, it is when the search ceases that peace appears, not because everything has been resolved, but because you have left the internal war against time. The now is the only real place because it is the only place where life happens. The past only exists as memory, the future as imagination, but the body, the breath, the perception, all of that only exists here. Silence plays a fundamental role in this. Not just external silence, but the inner silence that arises when you stop demanding answers from life. Buddhism doesn't say that silence is emptiness. It says that silence is the answer. When the mind stops racing, it begins to see. When you're not trying to get anywhere, you realize where you already are, and this changes your relationship with suffering, with impermanence, with fear, because you are no longer asking for the present moment to be different from what it is. You are learning to inhabit the moment with awareness. This doesn't mean giving up on life, nor becoming passive. On the contrary, it means acting without carrying the weight of needing everything to go right for you to be at peace. It means living more lightly, because you're not using the present moment as a bridge to an idealized future. You are fully present here. And when you are fully present here, attachment begins to loosen naturally, not through effort, but through direct understanding. You understand in your body that holding on doesn't bring security. Being present does. Perhaps now it makes sense to look at your own routine and realize how many times you are physically present but mentally absent. How many times do you live in the almost, in the soon, in the when this changes? And perhaps you'll realize that the tiredness doesn't just come from tasks, but from this constant distance from the present moment. Mindfulness doesn't add anything to life. It removes the excess of expectation, of control, of anticipation. And in this clear space, something essential begins to emerge. Before we move on to the next part, I want to invite you to consciously mark this moment. If something here resonated with you, write a simple word in the comments without overthinking it. It could be presence, it could be now, it could be I stop. This gesture seems small, but it anchors the intention. Like and subscribe if you feel this type of reflection helps you live with more clarity, because from here we will delve deeper into how this presence transforms, in practice, the way you relate to time, to pain, and to the very idea of meaning. When you truly accept that everything passes, something changes silently, almost imperceptibly at first, but profoundly transformative from within. It's not an intellectual acceptance, the kind the mind repeats to appear mature. It's a felt, bodily, psychological, and conscious acceptance. And when that happens, fear begins to lose its power. Not because life has become predictable, but because you've stopped demanding predictability to feel safe. Anxiety diminishes, not because problems have disappeared, but because you're no longer living a few steps ahead of the present moment. You begin to inhabit the now with more presence, and that reorganizes everything. Accepting impermanence doesn't mean living in cold, distant, indifferent detachment. On the contrary, it means living with greater intimacy with life. When you understand that nothing can be held forever, each moment gains more value. You stop postponing life, waiting for the ideal moment, the perfect version, the total security that never arrives. You start living now. And this is profoundly practical, because the mind that accepts the flow stops wasting energy trying to control what cannot be controlled. This energy returns as clarity, as attention, as emotional lightness. Relationships change first. They become lighter because you don't enter them with the unconscious need to possess, secure, or hold on. You connect without making the other person the pillar of your emotional stability. And this generates something paradoxical. Less attachment creates more connection. Less demanding creates more presence. Less fear of loss creates more space for true affection. When you accept that people also change, you stop demanding that they maintain old versions of themselves. You listen more, observe more, react less. And this internal change is felt, even when it's not spoken. In everyday life, accepting impermanence translates into simple, almost invisible gestures. Eating mindfully, savoring the flavor instead of rushing through the meal as if it were an obstacle. Walking, while being aware of the body, the ground, the breath, instead of using the journey merely as a means to get somewhere. Breathing consciously when the mind triggers scenarios, remembering that air enters and leaves without asking permission from anxiety. These practices are not sophisticated rituals. They are choices of presence. They are ways of saying to the body and mind, I am here. And something curious happens when you live like this. Gratitude arises effortlessly. Not that performative forced gratitude that the mind repeats as a moral obligation, but a silent gratitude, born from the recognition that nothing is guaranteed, and precisely for that reason, everything is precious. A simple encounter, a moment of silence, a peaceful night, an honest conversation. When you accept that everything passes, you stop treating life as a rehearsal and begin to live it as a real experience. And this drastically reduces unnecessary suffering. Control begins to loosen. Not because you've given up on acting, but because you've realized that acting isn't the same as controlling. You do what needs to be done, but you let go of the obsession with the result. This brings a feeling of inner freedom that's hard to explain in words, but easy to recognize when it arises. It's as if the mind breathes better, as if the body stops being constantly on alert. Presence replaces tension, awareness replaces haste, and the present moment ceases to be just an interval between past and future, becoming the place where life truly happens. To live without postponing life is this: not waiting to be less tired to live, not waiting to be more resolved to feel, not waiting for fear to disappear to act, because fear always appears when there is attachment to the outcome. But when there is presence, fear doesn't disappear. It loses control. You act anyway, with more gentleness, with more clarity, with more truth. Accepting impermanence doesn't take away the pain of the world, but it takes away the need to fight against reality all the time. And this constant struggle is what is most exhausting. There is a profound freedom that is born when you stop demanding that life be different from what it is. This freedom is not noisy. It doesn't announce itself. It is felt. It's in the way you react to changes, in the way you deal with small losses, in the way you accept internal cycles. Emotions come, emotions go. Thoughts arise, thoughts pass. And you begin to realize that there is something within you that observes all of this without needing to get lost in each movement. This perception is transformative because you stop being confused by everything that happens. Perhaps now you can look at your own routine and identify where resistance still exists, where you're still tightening things too much, where you're still trying to free something that's already in motion. Not to blame yourself, but to realize. Awareness doesn't accuse, it reveals. And every time something is clearly revealed, change has already begun. Not as an obligation, but as a natural consequence of seeing things more clearly. Before we move on, I want to invite you to bring this to life, not just understand it. If this passage resonated with you, write a word in the comments that represents how you want to live from now on. It could be lightness, acceptance, presence, or even, I will no longer postpone. This simple gesture strengthens your inner commitment. And if you feel that this type of reflection helps you live more consciously, like and subscribe, because the next part delves even deeper into this silent freedom that is born when you stop fighting against what is happening and begin to walk with the flow of life. Perhaps, after all this, the mind still wants a clear answer, something that can be kept as a final phrase, as a secure definition, as a point of arrival. But true meaning, according to Buddhism, doesn't present itself like that. It doesn't close. It doesn't end. It doesn't become a slogan. It remains open, breathing along with the experience. Because perhaps the meaning of life has never been to last. Perhaps it has always been to be whole, present, awake in the instant that life happens, without needing to freeze it, without needing to explain it until we lose contact with it. When you begin to look from this quieter place, something reorganizes itself within you, not as a grand dramatic revelation, but as a fine-tuning of perception. You realize that you have spent too long trying to find meaning in external structures, when Buddhism has always pointed to something simpler and at the same time more challenging: living awake, awake to the body, to the breath, to the mental states that arise and disappear. Awake to the fact that everything changes, including you, and that perhaps peace lies not in preventing this change, but in learning to walk with it. The meaning, in this perspective, is not in leaving an eternal legacy, nor in building something that withstands the test of time. It lies in the quality of presence as you journey through time. It lies in loving without possessing, in engaging without becoming imprisoned, in caring without transforming the other into an emotional guarantee. Loving without possessing does not mean loving less. It means loving with greater clarity, without the anxiety of needing love to last, to validate its existence, without the demand that the other fill voids that only consciousness can illuminate. Breathing without fear of the end is another profound point of this teaching. The fear of the end is almost always present, even when it's not named. It disguises itself as haste, accumulation, a need for control. But when you observe your breath with mindfulness, you realize something essential. Each inhalation ends. Each exhalation ends. And yet, life goes on. The body doesn't panic because it trusts the rhythm. Perhaps the mind can learn from this. Perhaps the meaning lies in trusting the flow more than in control. Buddhism doesn't offer easy comfort. It offers clarity. And clarity, at first, can even be frightening, because it removes the crutches the mind uses to feel safe. But over time, this clarity transforms into gentleness. You begin to realize that you don't need to arrive anywhere to be living correctly, that there is no final point where everything will finally make sense. There is only this moment, lived with more or less awareness. And this perception changes the way you relate to the past, to the future, and to yourself. When you understand that meaning isn't about lasting, the fear of loss diminishes. When you understand that meaning is about being, anxiety about the future loses its power. When you understand that living consciously is more important than living right, guilt begins to dissolve. Not because you become indifferent, but because you become more honest with the nature of life. Impermanent, fluid, uncontrollable, and paradoxically beautiful precisely because of that. Perhaps the echo that remains now is not an idea, but a feeling, a slightly wider inner space, a silence that doesn't bother you so much, a pause between one thought and another. This echo is important. It doesn't demand an immediate response. It demands listening. And if you can remain in this space for a few moments without filling it with distractions, without rushing to the next thing, something very subtle begins to reveal itself, not as absolute truth, but as intimacy with one's own life. According to Buddhism, the true meaning lies not in solving the mystery of life. It lies in inhabiting the mystery without fear, in accepting that not knowing is part of the experience, in allowing life to be greater than explanations. When you let go of the need to close the question, the heart relaxes, the mind slows down, and you realize that even without definitive answers, it is possible to live with more peace, more presence, and more compassion for yourself and for others. Perhaps you've never stopped to wonder what it would be like to live like this, not trying to make anything last forever, not running from the end, just living, breathing, feeling, observing. Perhaps this is the deepest invitation of this reflection, not to change everything at once, but to start looking differently, to live a little more awake today than yesterday, to love a little more freely, to breathe with a little less fear. Before we move on, I want to invite you to participate silently, but consciously. If this reflection touched you, write a word in the comments that represents what you felt. It could be peace, silence, being, presence, or even, I wake up. This simple gesture creates a sense of belonging and anchors the intention. If this content resonates with you, please like and subscribe to the channel. This helps the video reach more people who may also be looking not for a ready-made answer, but for a space to breathe, reflect, and continue walking with more awareness.